Democrats are now embracing some weird messaging when it comes to the Trump campaign, and we mean that literally. As Politico puts it, allies of Kamala Harris are shifting their characterization of the Republican presidential ticket from being a threat to democracy to just plain weird. Take a listen.
Listen to the guy. He's talking about Hannibal Lecter and shocking sharks and just whatever crazy thing pops into his mind. That is weird behavior. And I don't think you call it anything else.
I think Donald Trump, I know him, and he's probably sitting and watching the TV, and every day it comes out Vance has done something more extreme, more weird, more erratic.
It's not just a weird style that he brings. It's that this leads to weird policies.
You may have noticed Donald Trump has been resorting to some wild lies about my record. And some of what he and his running mate are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
Joining me now, Theron Johnson, former Southern Regional Director for Obama's 2012 campaign and a Democratic strategist. Susan Del Percio is a Republican strategist and MSNBC political analyst. Okay, Theron, what's with the weird?
Well, I'll tell you this, Chris. You're right. A lot of surrogates, the vice president herself has chosen to use this word. And I think it's a good way to describe the former president. Now, one thing that I know for sure, there are probably 10 other words that they want to use that could describe the former president. But weird seems to have a sort of tone to it and it's sticking. It's many Democrats believe that there are unorthodox things about Donald Trump before he even ran for president. But we remember how he ran early on to destroy the Republican Party. Yes, he won in 2016. And there were a lot of weird things that he said while he was president in his 4 years. And so it's got to be something that the polling data shows resonates not only with Democrats, but it also resonates with working class Americans. And this is what this race is going to come down to, is that working class Americans of all races have got to figure out who they want to vote for in this race. And I believe that Kamala Harris and her team and the surrogates are honing in on this message, because I will challenge any Republican to have a debate with me or any other Democratic strategist, and we can write down at least 25 things that the former president has either said or done that can be classified as weird. But that's not ultimately what the campaign is going to focus on for the duration. But it is something now that I think that is resonating with the base and those working class Americans.
I think, Susan, that Theron used an interesting word, which is tone, right? Something we know that voters, particularly those middle voters, have talked about. They talked about it 4 years ago. They're talking about it now. Let's hear, conversely, some of the things Donald Trump has said.
She was a bum 3 weeks ago. She was a bum. A failed vice president and a failed administration. So now we have a new candidate to defeat the most incompetent, unpopular, and far-left vice president in American history. She's a radical left lunatic. She has no clue. She has no clue. She's evil.
Evil, lunatic, incompetent, bum, as opposed to weird. Does that speak to those voters who, frankly, are exhausted by the level of vitriol in politics today?
Well, Donald Trump sounds plain old bonkers. I'm going to add that as one of the words we can use in addition to weird. And the problem for Donald Trump is the campaign may have adjusted to a Harris candidacy, but Donald Trump hasn't. He hasn't figured out what to say about her. He keeps trying these lines, and they're not going to work, Chris, because at this point, he's got to go for the middle. That's where the fight is. And he's not going to get, especially independent women in the suburbs, with that kind of language.
I mean, you talked about this again, Theron, as, being part of the tone. I don't think it's necessarily a coincidence that many Democrats were using that same word at the same time. But honestly, what do you think it buys Democrats? What does it buy the campaign, and for how long?
Well, it reminds Democrats that we cannot underestimate a Trump candidacy. I'm not saying that we took him for granted in 2016, but there were many people, including myself, that thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win that race. And so we learned from our mistake. We saw 4 years of him doing the name callings. I mean, what you just showed, Chris, is only a snapshot into what the former president has said about not just Vice President Harris, but other women who he has attacked along the way. And so, again, it's a phased approach. It's driving up momentum. It's a very sort of politically correct way to describe the former president's behavior. And I think you'll hear more harsh words used to describe him as the campaign goes on, and definitely at the convention. But again, I go back to what my colleague just said. We know that the goal here is 270 electoral votes. Her choice for vice president by August 7th will play an added role into that. But ultimately, there's got to be data that shows how do you motivate the base, but more importantly, what are those moderate, independent voters, those working class Americans of all races want to hear about this man, and just compare the two. You can say a lot of things about Vice President Kamala Harris. Yes, they're going to talk about how she laughs, and they're going to talk about her being a woman. The sexism will be on Front Street going forward. But ultimately, I think that the American people is looking forward to the future. And who's the best person to continue what Joe Biden has done for this country and make it even better going forward?
Yeah, one of the interesting things, I think, in this campaign is how memes that people on the right used, they thought, to attack Harris actually have been sort of adopted, especially by a lot of younger voters, which we know they can be unpredictable, right? Mm-hmm. So she seems to be changing her social media narrative. Let me play for you a TikTok that just went out.
Hey, Kamala, what are we going to say to Donald Trump in November?
Bye, bye, bye. Bye, bye, bye.
Melissa Ryan, who has worked in digital strategy for progressive campaigns for Democrats, told NBC, "This is a reversal of what I saw in 2016 when it felt like Trump had just taken over the internet. In 2024, who wins the internet? How important is it?"
Well, who wins it in a positive way is Vice President Harris. She's going to keep out there with her message. And it should stand out that she's nearly 20 years his junior. So when we talk about the future, younger people, seeing Donald Trump on TikTok just really doesn't work. So,
but also, there in some of these, I think there's a question of who's having fun. And it seems like people are looking for fun.
Energy and going forward have something to bring. And just to follow up on what Theron said, Harris gets to introduce her vice president by August 7th. That's going to be a lot of media and a lot of press. Then she rolls into a convention on August 19th, and that's going to dominate. And just a month later, Chris, people start voting. So this is going to be really difficult for Donald Trump to break through.